Hello everyone, and welcome to this video tutorial on how to install LimeSurvey 6 Community Edition on a Debian 11 server. My name is Jeremiah and I'm the Systems Librarian at Eastern Oregon University. I like to make content about open source software and systems that may be of interest to libraries. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. So today I'm going to look at how to install LimeSurvey on a Debian server. And LimeSurvey is a free and open source online statistical survey web application. So the advantage of installing something like this on your web server, on your website, or even as a standalone system is that when you have surveys, you don't have to worry about ads popping up. It's also quite robust, so I think it is a really valuable tool for institutions that really do a lot of surveys, online surveys. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start by going to VirtualBox. So I have VirtualBox set up here, and you'll notice I have a number of machines available to me in this virtual environment. Currently I have the Debian GNOME virtual machine up and running, and actually this is what I'm going to use for most of the video in terms of connecting to the server that we're installing LimeSurvey on. It's just easier, and I think you'll see why as we get a little bit further into things. But so right now, what I just want to point out is I have this LimeSurvey virtual machine that I've created, and I actually cloned that off of this Debian 11 base server. So essentially what this is just a very basic Debian server, a basic 11.6 Debian server. It's very minimal. I don't have a lot on it, and the reason why I have that is because when I do videos, I don't want to have to create a new server every time. So if I have this base server, I can just clone it, and a lot of these things were actually based off of that. I'm going to put a link in the upper right corner to a video on how to install Debian 10 on a VirtualBox machine. So if that's something you're interested in, or you don't have a server to work with, go ahead and watch that video. You'll then have a base server that you can use to follow along with this video. So my understanding too is that Debian 10's installation is pretty much the same as Debian 11. It's the same steps. So if that's not the case, somebody please leave a comment to let me know, and I think I'll probably do another video on how to install Debian 11 as a virtual machine on VirtualBox. Okay, so in any case, being a very minimal server, there are some settings that I'm going to need in order for everything to work the way I want it to. So currently you'll see that the LimeSurvey server is highlighted, and now that it's highlighted, I can go to Settings. And from here, the first thing I want to look at is Network. So I'm going to click on that. We'll see that it's attached to NAT, and I forget what that stands for. But in any case, that is not what we want. It's going to stop us from being able to SSH into the server. So what I need to do is select Bridged Adapter here. So I'm going to do that. Now the other thing that I like to do is under General, if I click on General, and you'll see an Advanced tab here. The shared clipboard, this actually comes in pretty handy sometimes, so I'm just going to switch that to bidirectional. Same with drag and drop. This is just going to allow me to drag and drop things from my host machine. It's going to allow me to share the clipboard with my host machine, and that often comes in handy. In this case, it's probably not a huge deal because we're going to SSH into the server, but in any case, I like to have that set. So with those two settings, I can now click OK. And what I need to do is actually get the IP address of LimeSurvey. So now that I have it highlighted, I'm just going to come up here and click the Start button. And I'm going to pause while this boots up because it takes a while and it's not very interesting to watch. Okay, so I finally reached my login screen. I'm going to go ahead and put my credentials into this. Gotta make sure I'm there. Let's see. So in my case, my username is J Kellogg. You're going to want to use the admin user that you've set up on your server. And now I'm going to hit enter, and now it's going to ask for my password, so I'll put that in. Okay, so first thing I want to do is make sure I'm actually connected to the internet, and I'm going to use that with the ping command, so ping, and then you can just do google.com. And this is what you want to see, so that's good. We're connected to the internet. I'm going to do Control C to stop that. I'm going to clear this out. with the clear command. So you just type in clear and enter. Now the last thing I want to do in this environment is get the IP address of this server, because we're going to SSH into it and we need that IP address. So you can do that with IP ADDR, IP space ADDR, and enter. And I can't highlight it here, but under the ENPOS3 listing there's a line that starts with INET, and that is my IP address for this server. So I'm just actually going to write that down. So 10.3.20.137. So I have this written down, so I have it for my reference. But at this point, I'm not going to use this screen anymore. I want to SSH into this, and the biggest reason for that is using VirtualBox and going directly into the server. It makes it really difficult to drag and drop things. It makes it difficult to highlight things, and I want to be able to highlight things so that people can actually see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do at this point is you'll see that I have my Debian GNOME system up and running, and I use that for development work. So what I'm going to do is just open that up. Let's see, bring it on over here, make it bigger. And so I have guest editions installed on this. And actually, I think what I'll do is put another link in the upper right corner right now to show how to install Debian with a desktop environment. I believe that video is actually specifically Debian 11, so you're all good there. So if you want something similar to this, go ahead and follow that video. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is open up Firefox. So that'll be the first thing that I do, and I'm just going to test things out. First, I'm going to type in the IP address of the server that we intend to put LimeSurvey on. 130, what was it? 37. I'm going to hit enter. And so you'll see we're unable to connect, and it automatically put this HTTPS in there. That's actually going to cause some troubles later if I try to refresh this page, but I'll talk a little bit more about that once we get there. But for now, I just wanted to show that there is nothing here for us to connect to. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is open up a terminal. Now I have this pinned to my sidebar here. If you're new to Linux and a Linux desktop environment, to find the terminal, you want to click on the Show Applications icon here, and then you could just start to type terminal and it'll show up there. And if you right click it, you can, well, in this case I have it on favorites, but you can place on favorites, which will put it in that sidebar. Okay, now I press the escape button to get out of that, pressed escape again, and so now we're where we want to be. So I'm going to open this terminal, and what I want to do is SSH into the LimeSurvey server that I got the IP address for. And for those who are unfamiliar with SSH, that stands for Secure Shell or Secure Socket Shell. And what this allows us to do is I can use a terminal on a client machine to remote into the server. So essentially it is a way to use the command line and get remote access to another machine. So I'm going to do that with the SSH command. And in order for this to work, you need to have OpenSSH installed on your computer. Let's see, I'm going to run the dpackage command to actually take a look at that. So dkpg space, is it -l? I think it's -l. Oh, it's dpkg. Sorry about that. And -l and then enter. And this is going to list all of the software that's installed on this machine. Now I have to use the down arrow to get to where I want to be. And so I believe I'm looking for OpenSSH. If you follow the video that I had before for installing Debian 10 on a VirtualBox machine, that's going to show you how to install it in such a way that it has OpenSSL already installed. And so that's actually what I did in this case, because I knew that I would often be SSHing into the base server I created for Debian. Okay, LM, let's see, we're almost there. OpenSSH. So if you don't have this installed, I believe all you need to do is run sudo apt install open ssh-server. Okay, so if I press the Q button, I'll quit out of that. I'm going to clear this. And so again, if you need to install that, it would be sudo, which is letting the system know to run this as an administrator. So you do whatever user you're using on this machine must have administrator privileges. So you would do sudo apt, and apt is the repository that we get our software from when we're using Debian-based Linux. And then we type install, and then it would be open ssh-server, and just an example, I'll just hit enter. It's going to ask for my password because I used sudo. And so it's telling us it's already installed. So I'm good there. You're going to also need to make sure this is installed on your server. So the liblime or the LimeSurvey server that I got the IP address for, you're going to have to run that command in there if you don't have it already installed. Okay, so that's how this works, the SSH thing. You're going to need to make sure you have Open SSH server installed on this. Okay, so now I'm ready to SSH into the LimeSurvey server, and I do that with the SSH command. And then the machine I'm logging into has a user on it. I'm going to have to identify who that user is. My virtual machines all have the jkellogg username, so in order for me to get into that LimeSurvey one, I'm going to use jkellogg at 10.3.20.137. So that was the IP address that I got for my LimeSurvey server. If I go ahead and hit enter, it's now going to ask for the password for that jkellogg user that's on the LimeSurvey server. And I'll just put that in. And now I'm connected. Oftentimes you'll get a warning saying that, we haven't connected to this machine before. Do you really want to connect to it? In this case, it's perfectly safe. Both of these servers belong to you, so it's not a big deal. So in that case, when you get that message, you just want to type in yes and enter. Okay. Now you'll see that we are in a different server. So this host name here is Debian, whereas my desktop environment is Debian Dev. Okay, I'm going to clear this out, and we can now begin the installation process. So what I'm going to do is actually just open a new tab, and I'm going to search for LimeSurvey installation, and I'll hit enter. And you should get this very first hit of the LimeSurvey manual, and it's the community edition. So I'm going to go ahead, and that's what we want. That's the free version. There's a paid version too. You could actually get this hosted by LimeSurvey, and they'll do all of the support for you and all that. That's nice for institutions that have lots of money. We're a small university, so we don't really have the resources to get that kind of service. So I'm going to go ahead and click installation, and this will bring us to the instructions on what we need to do to install LimeSurvey Community Edition. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and under the general thing here, so they're expecting that we already have a web server. As you can see here, we don't. So we're going to do that. That'll actually probably be the first thing that we do. Yes, let's do that right now. Let's make sure we have a web server. So in order to do that, you want to open up your terminal, and we're going to use the apt repository once again, and we'll do sudo apt install apache 2. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and put in my password, and I will pause as this installs. Oh, you might get this prompt here. Do you want to continue? It's just telling you how much disk space is going to be used and all that. I'm going to do Y for yes and then hit enter. And now I will pause. Okay, so after 10 seconds or so, it should be installed, and we can check on that by coming back to our browser. Now remember, we had this problem loading the page. If I hit the refresh button, we're still going to get this page. But if we take out the HTTPS, because we haven't configured this server for HTTPS, we're going to need to take that out, and then we can just hit enter, and you should get this Apache 2 Debian default page. Okay, so now we have our web server. We're good to go there. Let's go back to the installation instructions. And so they're saying we could actually install this on Windows PC. I'm not going to do that because it's kind of worthless. I mean, it's fine for testing things out, but in order to have it so that people can actually access this, I'm just using a web server. Okay, this next section, make sure you can use LimeSurvey on your website. So there are some requirements that we need to ensure are there. So these are the minimum requirements for LimeSurvey 6. So the first thing they're telling us is we need a minimum of 250 megabytes of disk space. That's pretty small. I think most servers are going to have that, but we should check it just in case. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to use the df command. First, I'm going to clear this. And anytime that you get a command that you're unsure of what it is, how it works, you can use the man command in order to get all of that kind of information. So with the df command, if I just type in man space df and hit enter, we're going to get a description of what this command does. So df report file system disk space usage. So that's what we want. We want to know how much disk space is available and how much disk space was allocated at the start. So it's just a matter of typing df. Now we're going to use a tag on that. So under options, you get so many different things here that you can put in as an option. I'm going to use this -H, and what that does is it prints sizes and powers of 1,000. So the output of that command when we use this H tag is going to come out in gigabytes, which is what I want. Okay, so to get out of the man pages, we just need to press the Q button on your keyboard. That'll take you out of there. So now I'm going to run df-H, and if you're using a Debian Linux system, you want to look for the one that says SDA. So this is the full partition of this Linux system, SDA1. It might say SDA0. It depends on how you have things partitioned. But in any case, I have everything on one partition. So right here, I can see that the size of this drive is 52 gigabytes, and I've only used 2 gigabytes, so I have 47 gigabytes left here. Clearly, that's more than enough for this particular system. So we're good to go there. Let's go back to the instructions. So next, they're telling us we need MySQL 5.5.3 or later. So I'm not actually going to use MySQL. I'm not going to use Microsoft SQL, and I'm not going to use Postgres. I'm actually going to use MariaDB, and that is an offshoot of MySQL. But the thing I like about MariaDB is it tends to be more in the spirit of open source, and that's what I prefer rather than having to rely on Oracle. I mean, who knows how long Oracle's going to allow free downloads of MySQL. Probably indefinitely. That's what they say, but you never know. So I'm going with MariaDB in this case. If you're using Debian 11, you can use the apt repository for this, and you should be okay. You'll get a version that is acceptable. So I'm going to run sudo apt install. Now, if you're using Debian 10, I'm not fully sure if this will work. My guess is it probably does. Certainly if it's anything before Debian 10, probably not going to work. So you'll need to make sure you upgrade your server to Debian 10 and then to Debian 11 if you're if you're using Debian 9, for example. So sudo apt install MariaDB-server. I'll hit enter. And Y for yes, and I'll just pause as this goes. Okay, so once that's installed, I'm not going to do this, but I do want to point out that there is a script to make MariaDB, which is a MySQL database, more secure. And you can run that with sudo, it's not apt, sorry, sudo mysql underscore secure underscore installation. Now, you'll see that I completed that pretty quick. What I did was I got to like INS and then I just clicked tab and that auto completed it for me. So if you want a more secure database, you can go ahead and run this. I don't really have an opinion on whether it's helpful or not. I tend to use it in production environments just to be sure. But in any case, I'm going to not run this because we don't need to go through that. It's kind of self-explanatory when you run it. And if you do run it, I'm not 100% sure if everything we do here is going to work the same way. So I'm not going to bother with that. And let's see, I think now we want to go back to our instructions. So we have MySQL installed. So now we want to look at PHP. And so the version requirements, we're using LimeSurvey 6. So we need to be sure that we have PHP 7.4 or 8.1. Using the Debian apt repository for Debian 11, we're going to get 7.4 by default. I'm not sure if you can actually install 8.1 using the apt repository. So I'm just going to go with the default that they have right now, which is 7.4. I'm going to open my terminal up again. Let's clear this out a bit. And we'll install PHP. So sudo apt install PHP. And I'm going to hit enter. Y for yes, and we'll just pause as this installs. Okay, so we have installed PHP 7.4 successfully. We want to go back to our instructions, and so we've made that installation. We're now, let's see, we'll just make this a little bigger. So now we're at this part where it says we need to have the short open tag setting set to on in php.ini. Okay, so we can get there. I'll show you how to get to that ini file. What we're going to need to do is uncomment that line. So what I'm going to do is if I do cd and just a /, I'm going to go to the root directory of this system. It's the be all and end all. You can't go any further back than root. So cd / and enter. Now if I use the ls command, that's just to list the contents of the directory, this is what your root directory is going to look like. You'll see that one of the directories is labeled etc. That's the directory we want to get into. That's where most of your program files are going to be. So let's cd into that. Change directories into, I think you have to keep the / there, etc. And if I do ls, what I want to do is look for PHP. So I see that right here. Let's cd into that. cd etc php. When I hit the cd button here, or when I typed cd here and didn't put in the path, it just brought me to my home directory as represented by that tilde. So I have to redo this. cd /etc /php. List the contents there. You'll see that the only directory we have available is 7.4. So I'm going to cd 7.4. Now, when I use the ls command here, we're going to get a directory for Apache 2. Let's cd into that. List the contents there. Okay, so we have PHP ini here. We can edit that with the nano editor. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And actually, I don't need this Windows stuff showing. So I'm going to make this screen a little bigger for us. Okay, I'm going to clear this. And I'm going to use the nano editor to edit that php.ini file. So sudo, and you're going to need to use sudo because we're in the etc directory and mostly root owns this. So you need to be an administrator to make changes here. Sudo nano php.ini. Okay, so there are a lot of lines here, 1947. That's a lot, so we're going to do a search for what they want us to check on. So I'm going to highlight this short underscore open underscore tag. Make sure you don't get these little things in here because that's going to mess things up. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come into here and I'm going to use Control W, and that brings up this search prompt. And now I'm going to paste that variable into this search bar and hit enter. And that takes us right to where we want to be. And the instructions really were telling us that we need to make sure this default value is set to on, and it is. However, the semicolon at the very start of this line actually comments it out, so it's not read by the computer. So I'm going to delete that, and that's all we have to do here. So to get out of this file, I'm going to do Control X, and it's going to ask if we want to save to the modified buffer, and we can just type Y for yes. And it'll bring us here to the file name to write, and we don't want to change the file name because the system is going to be looking specifically for php.ini. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it has written my edits to the php.ini file, so we should be good there. Now let's go back to our installation instructions. So we've just done this. Okay, and the following PHP modules libraries should be enabled. So really what we're going to do is install these modules, and that will by default enable them. And the way to do that is, let's see, this first one, MB string, pretty standard. So this is a PHP module. I need to make sure it's installed. So if I do sudo apt install php-mb string and enter, this will install that module for me. And while it's doing that, let's take a look at this here. So the PDO database driver for MySQL. So I kind of figured that I would have to install like php-pdo, and it's already installed, and it's installed through the php-common, which was installed when we ran install php. But just to demonstrate that, if I do sudo apt install php-pdo, I'm going to get this message saying that it's selecting PHP 7.4 common instead of PHP PDO. So the information we're getting here is just telling us, hey, this is already installed, so don't worry about it. I'm going to clear that. Let's go back to the instructions. So I've installed what needs to be installed for MySQL. Now the thing is, we're going to actually, there's another PHP module that actually needs to be installed here. We're using Debian 11. I think this is kind of specific to Debian-based machines. But what we need to do is we need to ensure that PHP and MySQL, or in our case Mariadb, can communicate between each other. Now we can do that with sudo apt install MySQL. Actually, no, it's sudo apt install php -mysqli. So maybe that's PHP MySQL interface. I'm not sure actually what that stands for, but in any case, this is what we want. We're going to need this. This is an important thing to add. So I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so now we have that installed. We should be good there. And let's go back to our instructions. And they're telling us here, we assume in general that all PHP default libraries are enabled. And they give us a list here of things that they think should be installed and enabled. And we can check on this to see whether or not they are installed. So I'm going to open up the terminal. I'm going to clear, and I'm going to run the command php-m. So this just lists modules that are enabled in PHP. So if I hit enter, what I'll do is make this a little slimmer, and let's just look at the list here. So they're telling us we need to have hash enabled. We have that. Session is another one. So session, we're good to go there. OpenSSL or MCRYPT, I guess mcrypt. Let's see, is that one there? The mcrypt is not there. OpenSSL, do we have that? Yes. OpenSSL is good. Simple XML. Uh-oh, no simple XML. Okay, so if you encounter anything that's missing here, you can simply do the sudo apt install php dash whatever that module is. So if it was hash, it would be sudo apt install php dash hash. In our case, we're missing simple XML, so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate what to do when one of these doesn't show up. Okay, so this is listed. I guess what I'm going to do is clear to make that a little easier. And so, as I said, if you're missing any of those, it is sudo apt install php, and like if it was hash that we're putting in, we just put hash. If it was session, it would just be session, so on and so forth. In this case, we need simple XML, and I think you might actually need to make it all lowercase. Simple XML, so that should be good. Hit enter. Y for yes. Okay, we can open this up a little as it's installing. A little bigger. Okay, all right, good. So we have all of those required modules that were listed. Now let's go back to the installation instructions. So we have that. This doesn't really apply to us. Optional PHP and extensions. So let's go ahead and add all of these extensions here. Open up the terminal again, and I'm just going to clear. Okay, so the very first one is GD library. So I'm going to do sudo apt install php-gd, enter. Y for yes. Okay, let's look at the next module. That is IMAP. So we're going to need IMAP next. Now what I'm going to do is on the keyboard, I'm going to press the up arrow, and that takes me to my last command. If I press it again, it takes me back 2 commands, and so on and so forth. If I hit the down arrow, it's going to take me forward to this command once again. And so we just ran sudo apt install gd, and now we need to put in IMAP. So I'm just going to take out gd and put in IMAP and enter. Y for yes. Let's see what the next one is. LDAP. Okay, up arrow to get the command again, and just put in LDAP after taking out IMAP and enter. Y for yes. Okay, next one, zip. Okay, up arrow, put in zip. Y for yes. Okay, this zlib is, I don't think it's actually a PHP extension, because if we put in sudo apt install zlib, it's going to give us an error, unable to locate package. I'm just going to clear this out. So if you do want that installed, the command you actually need to run there is, let's see, it is sudo apt install. It's not a PHP module in this case. It's zlib1, so that is the number 1, not the letter L. And G, I think it is. Yeah. So that will install zlib, and I already have it installed. I'm not sure what package that came with, but it's there, so we're good to go. Okay, let's go back to the instructions. We've gotten all of those optional PHP extensions. So now they're talking about browser compatibility. So basically this works on everything, although you want to be careful about Internet Explorer if you're still using that. Not a good idea to be using it. Definitely I would ensure that you and your users stay away from it. All others are fine. I mean, if you're a Microsoft person, it looks like Edge will work. Personally, I really enjoy using Chromium or Mozilla Firefox. Opera's kind of nice too. In any case, let's see, they're talking about screen sizes. It's not really anything to worry about. Hosting for LimeSurvey. So actually you can have the LimeSurvey folks host this for you and manage it for you. We're a small university it's really difficult for us to find the resources to get that level of vendor support. And I also kind of feel that open source and hosting yourself, it just gives you more power. It gives you more control. So that's kind of my preference, regardless. But if you're uncomfortable with that, with this sort of server administration stuff, you definitely check into looking at the hosting companies that will give you, or you can put LimeSurvey on. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is download the latest stable LimeSurvey zip package. So I'm going to click on this download link here. That'll take us to the download page. And the current release for 6, as of this video, is 6.2.8. And what I'm going to do is right click on the download button and then go to copy link. And now, let's see, I'm going to open up my terminal once again. And now I'm going to go into my server's web directory. So I'm going to do that with change directories. So first we go to root, and then a directory called var, and then a directory called www, then /, and then HTML, and that's going to take us to our web directory. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. If I do ls, it will list the commands. You'll see this index HTML here. That's actually the HTML behind this page that we're seeing right here. Let's see, actually we don't need the download page anymore, I don't think. Yeah, we don't. I'm just going to close that. Okay, so I've downloaded that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my download into this HTML directory, and I'm going to do that with the wget command. So actually I think I might have to use sudo here. Sudo wget, and then I'm just going to paste the URL that I copied for the download, and I'll hit enter, and it shouldn't take very long. Okay, so now if I do the ls command, we'll see that we have this zip file here. Now I'm not 100% sure I have zip installed on this. I don't think it actually comes with default Debian. So what I'm going to do is sudo apt install zip, and yeah, I didn't have it installed. So you may want to run this command just to make sure you have it. Clear that. Let's see. So the next thing they're telling us to do, unpack. So we need to decompress the zip file we just downloaded. So I can do sudo unzip li, and then I'm just going to hit tab. That should complete everything for me. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and pause while that unpacks. Oh, no, I don't need to. Okay, now let's look at the instructions. I've unpacked. Okay, so we should be good there. Now we're on to this collect information about your server. So I'm using an IP, I'm not using a URL. So all of that really doesn't really pertain to us. I'm going to go to upload the file. So I did that directly. I'm not using an FTP server. Now we need to set directory permissions. So it looks like the LimeSurvey TMP, LimeSurvey upload, and application config all need to have read-write permissions for your web server. Okay, so we can do that. We can actually check on it. I'm going to clear that. I'm going to cd into the LimeSurvey directory. ls to list the contents. So TMP, what were the others? Upload and application config. So application, if I go into there, I'll find the config, and then upload is over here. So I need to make sure that these are readable and writable by my user. And actually, it's not my user, it's the Apache user. We're going to get into that a little bit more in a bit, but right now, let's just look at the permissions we have going on. So if you use the ls command for listing the contents of the directory, and then -l, LA, I think, that's going to give us the information we want. So application, that one is readable and writable by the owner, and upload and TMP, those are also readable and writable by the owner. And I can tell that by these two little letters here. If you don't see those for your user, what you're going to need to do is you're going to have to modify those directories so that they are readable and writable. And in the instructions, they tell us what command to use. You can use the chmod -r directory. Let's just do that just to be sure, just in case people out there don't find that they don't actually have this set up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to need to run sudo and then chmod and let's see -r and 755. So those are octal permissions. Basically 7 means you can do everything. You can read, write, and execute. I forget what 5 is. Kind of looks like it might be execute and read. And that's for groups. And then all users get the 5, which is execute and read. But the important thing is here, you need to make sure the first one is the 7, because that will give you the read, write, and execute permissions that are needed on these directories. And so let's see, they told us which ones. We needed application and config. Oops, config. Okay, so that's one. Now we can add the others too. So I'm just going to put in tmp and upload. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And so after you run that, and if you do lsla, if you didn't see the read and write permissions before, you should now. Okay, let's go back to the instructions. Okay, the other thing that they're telling us here, if we're using Linux permissions, we're going to have to change the owner of certain directories. These three, actually, these 3 directories right here, we need to change the ownership of that. Because right now, you'll see that root owns it, and the Apache user is the one that's going to have to own these particular directories. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clear that so things are a little easier to see. And really, I'm only using clear to take out some of the jumbled chaos we have going on in the terminal. But in any case, what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to use the up arrow to get to that last thing that I did there. So what I need to do is change the owner. So that's not the chmod command, that is chown. I'm still going to keep the -r because what that means is recursively. So what it's going to do is give permissions, the specified permissions for those directories and all of its subsequent directories and files. So it's just a way to make sure all contents within that directory are owned by whatever user you specify. So after the recursive tag, the -r, we need to put in the user. And in Debian 11, the Apache user is called www-data. So you want to make sure that's in there. It's very important. Okay, and then it's the same directories that we did when we modified the permissions. So at this point, I can go ahead and hit enter. And now if I do ls-la, you'll see that TMP and upload are now owned by www-data. Okay, and then application, root still owns the root of the application folder, but if we cd into there and lsla, you'll see that the config file that they told us needed to be owned by www-data is indeed owned by that user. So we're good there. I'm just going to cd change directories and then ... that just means go back one. So I'm going to go back to my LimeSurvey directory. And let's clear this. Okay, now let's go back to our instructions. And so the next thing we're doing here, I don't know why MySQL instructions are always kind of vague. But in any case, we're going to go ahead and set up both the database and the user and give that user permissions. So I'm going to open up the terminal. And in order to get into Mariadb, it's just you run sudo mariadb MariaDB, and because I'm a root user, I can log into MariaDB without any password. So I'm going to hit enter. Alright, so there are a couple of things that we're going to need to do here. The very first thing is we're going to need to create a database for LimeSurvey. So all of the information that you get from your surveys are going to be stored in this database. We don't have to worry about the tables because the installer that we will use later actually creates those for us. But in order for things to go smoothly, I've found that it's best just to create the database here right within MariaDB as well as the user. Okay, so to create the database, it's just you run the command create database, and then once you have that, you want to type in the name that you want. So I'm going to call it LimeSurvey, and you need to put a semicolon at the end, and you can hit enter. Now you don't have to. This can be lowercase or uppercase. It's just traditionally you'll see SQL queries tend to have uppercase for reserved keywords, but you can use lowercase too. So I'm going to hit enter. All right, now if I run show databases, oops, see I forgot my semicolon, but I can just put it in now and hit enter. You'll see that LimeSurvey is there. That's what we want. All right, now what we need to do is create the user and grant permissions for that user. So the command for that is going to be grant, and what we need to do is we need to get the privileges that we're going to grant to the user. I'm just going to come here and copy what they suggest. So I'm going to highlight it, copy it, come back to my terminal, paste all of those in there, and the next term we need to put in there is on. And let's see, what we need to do here is the LimeSurvey. So that's the database that we just created. We're making this user have permissions of select, create, insert, update, delete, alter, drop, index on this survey or on this database. Okay, so after we type in LimeSurvey, we're going to want to put in a dot, and what this is going to do is allow us to define all tables there. I'm just going to put an asterisk to say for all tables within that database, this user has permissions. And then we'll use the to keyword. And here's where we put in our username. So I'm going to call my user LimeSurvey underscore user. And this is all put in, the LimeSurvey user needs to be put in single quotes, and then the @ symbol, and then another single quote, localhost, because this server, this MySQL server lives on our current server. So we can use localhost there. And let's see, the last thing we need is to identify. So let's see, identified by. And here's where we put in our password. In this case, I'm going to make it easy and just use password. In a production environment, that's a very bad idea, so make sure you use a strong password if you are in a production environment. And so now after all of this is typed out, you want a semicolon at the end, and then you can hit enter. And then I think you can do show users, maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. I don't know that command off the top of my head. In any case, we didn't get an error, so we should be good to go there. Okay, I don't think we need to do anything else in here, so you can type exit, semicolon, enter. All right, I'm going to clear my screen to make things easier to view, and we're going to look at our instructions again. Let's see. So we created the database user. Okay, now they're telling us that we can go to this URL in order to finish the installation. So what I'm going to do is, instead of example.org, I'm using an IP address. And then what I need to do is just make sure we go to LimeSurvey admin. I'm just going to copy that and then come over to this tab So there's the IP address of my LimeSurvey server. I'm just going to paste what they had put earlier and then hit enter. This is a good example of yeah, you're going to reach this. This is actually going to happen to you as well. So the issue there is I forgot to restart Apache 2. So essentially, anytime that you add a PHP module or you configure PHP in a new way, you need to restart the Apache server so that it initializes those modules that you've added and all that. So in order to do that, we want sudo system. I have that? Yeah, system. Yep. CTL and restart and Apache 2. And you could do .service just to make sure, but I think it would be fine with just Apache 2. So we'll run this command. I'll hit enter. All right, that has restarted. And now, if I refresh this, it should take me to the installer. All right, so we're at the web installer. This is the easy part. We have this welcome page here. We just have to select our language. They give us tons and tons to choose from here, which is awesome. Let's see, I'm just going to keep it on English though. And so we get our preferred language. I'm going to start the installation. And so this is giving us the GNU General Public License, and that's really cool that they went with the GNU General Public License. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And this is the pre-installation check page. And what this is going to do is just make sure you have all of the requirements. And if you get these little green checks everywhere, you're good to go. I think we're good. I'm going to click on next. And so now they're going to ask a few questions about the database configuration. So database type, MySQL, that is what Mariadb is based off of. Database engine type, frankly, I'm not sure what that is, but I think we just want to leave it as it is. Database location is localhost. On that server, we have both the LimeSurvey files that we need as well as the Mariadb database, so localhost is going to work here. The only time this wouldn't work is if you installed your MySQL server on a different server. Then you'd have to put in that IP, or if you have a URL for it, you'd have to put that in there. Okay, our database user. So I'm going to use LimeSurvey user that we created when we went into Mariadb. Database password. So I'm going to do just password because that's what we had set it up when we were in Mariadb. Database name, that was LimeSurvey. So these are all going to have to match what you did before. Table prefix, we're just going to leave that as lime underscore. I'm going to click next. A database named LimeSurvey already exists. Yes, we know that. We created that. Do you want to populate the database now by creating the necessary tables? Yes, that's what we want to do. So we can click on Populate Database. And so now we just get our administrator settings page, and they're going to, you can change your admin login name, the password. I think it's password by default, and I'm just going to put in password again just to be sure. And I will use admin as the username. Administrator name, you could put in a different name there if you wanted to. You need to put in an email for your admin. I'm just going to use my work email. Site name, you could name this whatever you wanted. And let's see, let's just call it EOU surveys. Okay, default language is already set to English for me. I'm going to click next. Okay, so we are completely finished with the installation at this point. If I click on administration, it's going to go to the admin page, and I'm just going to username admin. Password is what I just put in there, and I get this little welcome box. So here I could just go straight to create a new survey, but I'm just going to close this. And so the SSL not enforced, so in order to use this on a secure server, you're going to need a server with SSL configurations. That's kind of the outside of the scope of this video. We won't really cover that. It's really hard to kind of get an SSL certificate when you're using IP addresses on a very localized network. So one of these days I want to figure out how I can get around that. But right now I'm not sure how to do that in the environment that I'm in. So I'm just going to go ahead and close that because I know it's not secure. Still using the default password. That's okay. And so here, you see the name EOU surveys. That's pretty cool. And, you can start creating surveys by clicking Create Survey. Of course, at this point, it gets a little bit outside of my knowledge base. I haven't actually played around too much with this. Perhaps if there's interest, if other people want an overview of how to use this, leave comments below. And I will try to do that. Of course, by the time people ask for that, I should be much better versed in how to use this. As I've said, I've only played around with it a little bit and found it every bit as powerful as anything else I've used that has lots of ad pop-ups and that sort of thing. Okay, so that is how we install LimeSurvey on a Debian 11 server. I hope you found this video to be informative and insightful and helpful. And I hope to see you in later videos. Thanks.